All right, welcome everybody to this session on the new project for the web offering coming from Microsoft. We wanted to put together this webinar. So the two areas that we wanted to work through are these new tools and services, and of course, what has been available to you up to this point regarding Project, for example, on the desktop, um, where Project Online fits into this, and then where the new project for the web. So we'll take a look at that, and then we'll move into the licensing. So the first thing is we have to understand that the new project for the web, as it's being called, and where Microsoft is really going with project is it is a what you can think of as a service-based offering that's built on Power Apps not built on SharePoint and not built within Project Online and PWA, essentially as a site collection. So it's going to be treated a little bit different. It's going to be treated as an app within your Office 365 apps, and you'll build it essentially from scratch. But just know that there is a shift in how you're going to be using these tools, but it's for the better. Now, this new P1 subscription is kind of the new kid on the block, so to speak, because it's something that Microsoft has not had before. And really, what it's doing is it's bringing the capabilities, really powerful capabilities that Microsoft Project has had as a desktop application. And it's bringing a lot of those down into the browser, something we haven't seen before, allowing an organization to really empower those, would-be project managers, maybe those first-tier PMs that need a project management tool. Really, anybody who needs a project management tool can start to leverage P1. Now, P3 and P5 are essentially just rebranding, relabeling of existing tools that Microsoft has already had out there, which is Project on the desktop. This is the scheduling tool. P5 you can think of as the server in the cloud license. This is giving you all of the capabilities that Project Online and PWA has to offer through the P5 license. So just take an inventory, think about who needs to have what license as you. Now the other thing we have are dashboards and reports in support of these different offerings that Microsoft has. So there's some nice out of the box dashboards and reports, so you can immediately start to see how this data can be put together and how it can be visualized. Now, what do these plans look like from a subscription perspective? With this new P1, we have a $10 a user a month. And immediately, as soon as you sign up in the subscription, the user goes in and see within their waffle the ability to just simply start to create these projects with this P1 license at $10 a month. So that's not a bad. Now the $30 a user a month in Project Plan 3. Remember what we said. That license and subscription is for. That is the desktop application for your users that need that scheduling tool. They need the heavy lifting that Microsoft Project Professional provides the users. So think about exactly who is going to need that. Now, one of the things to just keep in mind as you get these subscriptions is there is a big difference between a project plan, a P1 project, and a project that is created and managed with P3. So there's a very distinctive, there's a line we're going to draw in the sand between our P1 and our P3 projects. So just keep that in mind. But we'll dig into that more later on. I just want you to be just planting a seed there for something for you to be thinking about. Then you move on to P5, which, as you can see, price jumps up considerably. Again, keep in mind that this license, this P5 license, you only need one of it, right? and I have some slides on this, but just throwing that out there. So as you think about the users, you're thinking about who's going to need to be managing projects, right? From the perspective of lightweight projects or some, quick, easy hit, short, potentially short-term projects or short duration projects could be handled with P1, and perhaps your larger projects are managed taking advantage of P3 and the capabilities of P5. So that's kind of one way to think about it. The other thing we haven't talked about is the Essentials license. And the Essentials license you can think of as the end user license for interacting with PWA. Okay, so that is an additional license that you'll need for just your individual users. That would be your stakeholders, your portfolio analyzers, not necessarily your portfolio managers. Of course, your team members. You're going to have users that interact with Project Online and PWA that don't need, of course, Microsoft Project. They're not doing the heavy lifting, but they might be doing something like tracking their updates, reporting their progress, for example, on tasks, or maybe looking at resource availability. Right? Different scenarios like that will play out. All right, so this first plan, Project P1, you can think of as the first level of project, right? This kind of introduces the user into using something like a Gantt chart, for example, or managing a list of centralized tasks. And so those capabilities of being able to create things like dependencies, associate tasks into certain buckets, for example, and managing the actual assignment and tracking those updates, marking the task complete. For example, even starting to understand things like baselines within these projects that they're managing. So it's very easy to set up, quick and easy to set up. You're basically turning the license on, maybe sharing some knowledge transfer to the end user, the project manager, and they're up and running managing projects. There's so much team usage these days. A lot of organizations are gravitating towards Teams. It's a very powerful, platform. It replaces Skype from the perspective of communication, and so our users are there. So this P1, right, just drops right into it. So as we take a look at it, this is what the user will see with a P1 license. Standard list of waffles. You have this new icon, this new area to go to, simply called Project. Notice that it looks a little bit different than Microsoft Project, the desktop application. So that's your first kind of indication there that this is actually a little bit different. You'll notice that you drop right into a very specific URL called project.microsoft.com. So I'm being authenticated as a user. It shows me some projects that I've been working on, right, in this favorites area. And so you can add projects that are down in this lower area, and you can add them up to the top by basically just saying this is a favorite that I'm interested in. The one thing that you'll notice is the type, and that some of these say PWA project and some of them just simply say project. That's your first indication, or your second indication, the type of project that it is. One is either in PWA, so it's a PWA project. So if we click on it, it's going to take us into that very specific area. And the other project is what we're managing with Project for the Web. This is what we're getting with that P1, that first tier license. It's allowing us to create projects within this environment. It does not involve PWA. Okay, so that is the big distinction there, that if you're just using P1, the notion of a PWA project doesn't come into right, it's not factored in. The user just has to be concerned about how they're going to be building projects out of here. So this is where they'll go. If you want to know which projects you have, you're going to drop right into this URL. It's always going to be the same for them. Project.microsoft.com. It'll authenticate them. They'll see all of the projects that they happen to be working on. When you move into the P3 and P5 realm, that's when you'll start to create, right, these PWA projects and be sensitive to where those are being managed, because they'll be outside of this area, right, outside of this very distinctive landing page, or this portal, if you will, as you work with projects, right? So when we create new projects, you notice that I just simply come up to the top, I hit new blank project, and this is essentially just starting a new project for me. So I can easily just start to come up to the top. I'm going to rename my project here just by simply clicking on it. And because we're working in the browser, right, everything's in the web right now, you're not thinking about saving here either. You're really making the changes and clicking through the different areas. So notice as soon as I start typing here, demo project 1, I determine a date here, an estimated start date. It already identifies me as the owner. I haven't plugged in any kind of duration, so it's not, right, giving me any kind of finish date, but that'll get calculated, right, as soon as I start plugging in some tasks in here. So I click in this first line item, I start typing in some tasks. And as I'm going through, I'm either tabbing or clicking to particular areas. Now, as I go into the assign to, it would be looking for particular users that I potentially have associated into a team, for example. And it would also look through the entire 365 database for those that could be assigned to these tasks here. Notice the other columns like duration. This is something that's obviously useful to us as we build out, right, schedules like this. We want to know how long things are going to take, right? So I'm simply plugging in some additional tasks here. Notice that I can add a column here, and these are predefined columns that we have, so we can go back and look at some of these. What we're going to see with Project for the Web is that these columns that we have and this type of functionality to basically further define the list of these tasks are going to grow and mature with the tool. Also note the area that I'm in. So I'm looking at the tasks in a grid. Notice that there's a board. There's also a timeline. So I can go to the board area. Notice the buckets. So as you can see here, I can come into the bucket 1 and I can rename the bucket. And these were the buckets that were being referenced earlier when we were in the grid view. I can also drill down into each of the different tasks here. There's also drag and drop. Right, I can grab the different tasks and just simply move them. A lot of PMs and team members like to see their assignments, right, the work that they have in this view here. Then there's also the timeline. So those that have been working with project before, this is going to look, right, very familiar to them from the perspective of showing us a timeline and the tasks in which they're expected to be working. So obviously tasks can be added in here. You can manipulate the Gantt bars. Notice there's some nice functionality around associating, for example, one task to the other. If I just simply click on the in handle and drag it to the successor task, gather requirements, it's just a matter of dragging and dropping. So this is actually using a lot of the scheduling capabilities that we find in Microsoft Project, but now made available to us here within the browser. So think of P1 as giving really these first tier or level 1 project managers a lot of project capabilities directly here within the browser at a pretty reasonable price. Switching gears, let's move on to talking about P3. Let's go over the different features and capabilities that we find in P3. Right. This gives you all of the traditional project professional desktop capabilities, right? The ability to, use all of the different tools and features that are found in Microsoft Project. Now, one of the bullet points that you'll see Microsoft put out there is that there's additional functionality for managing projects and resources. And so we'll see a little bit of that as we kind of go through the demo. But one of the takeaways that just a lot of organizations don't realize is that even with the P3 subscription, you still have the ability to provision a PWA instance, right? So you do not have to have the P5 license and subscription in order for you to, provision the instances. So keep that in mind. So it's really doing two things for you, that when you move into this P3, that one, you have an associated Microsoft Project Professional client application that you can download and use, but you can also go out and start to provision these different instances. So every project manager that is going to need do the heavy lifting around Microsoft Project, they will need a P3 license. And so when we talk about project, of course, we're referring to the desktop app, right? Which is giving you just a little sample of that there. Let's get that resumed. So this is Project Pro. And what you'll notice is that if I click on File, for example, and some of you might be thinking, okay, well, what do I have? Am I using the, the click to install? Is it the online version? Which version do I have? Well, if you just simply go to Account, so if you go to your Backstage, go into Account, you'll notice that it tells me here, subscription product, Microsoft Project Online Desktop Client. That's my indication right there that I have a licensed version of the online desktop. I'm paying the $30 a month, as opposed to I went out and I, purchased the application, and I'm just, click to install it, and I've got the software running on my machine. And when there's an upgrade, I'll go out and purchase that one, or I'll, get the upgrade. This is implying there is no upgrades. I'm not going to go out and install any additional software. Pretty much as new features come out, they automatically, get installed on my particular machine, right? Yeah, automatically. What this is also doing for us, if I just go back to the main screen, and then I'll head up to the Backstage again, and if I go into this info area, you'll notice that it says Manage Accounts, Project Web Accounts. So this is really the distinguishing feature, or one of the distinguishing features, when we move from Project Standard to Project Professional as well, which is again giving us part of the this P3, that we have the ability to connect to Project Web App instances to be able to save and publish these projects from Project Pro, right? So that's again one of the big differences for us. Now, as we talk about these instances, and we refer to the ability to go out and simply work with a centralized location, right? This ability to have all your projects in one place, that's PWA, right? And notice that I'm looking at a file called Buildout Central. That's also the project that I happen to have open here. Notice it, Buildout Central. It's the same project. Okay, so we'll go back to that, take a look at it one more time. Well, there it is, Buildout Central, and it says PWA project. Okay, well, this particular project, if we click on it, is stored in a very specific location. So just pay a little bit of attention here to this URL. Notice what it says: Jeb System, SharePoint, Sites, PPM Quick Start. Right, so that's different than if I go back to project and you see the URL here, project.microsoft.com. So one of the takeaways from that is this location that we're looking at is a very specific address. It's a location within all of your other SharePoint sites and PWA sites. Okay. And so when you have either a P3 or a P5 license, it gives you the ability to create these sites. Think about it that way, right? So with that subscription to either P3 or P5, you then have the capability to create any number of these PWA instances in support of within your organization, however you're rolling this out. You may have a PWA instance that's specific to a department, for example, because they want to isolate, what they're doing with projects and maybe store everything there, or within IT or whatever the case may be. So you have a specific group, and you want to support them that way. Or it can be an enterprise rollout where you have one single instance and all of the projects are being managed out of just that one instance. So there's different strategies, different techniques that you can use when you are managing these various projects. But again, the takeaway is that when you are using P3 or P5, you then can go out and provision these instances, right? Well, what's the difference? So as you're looking at project in P1, you're saying, okay, well, I see all the projects in there, and I can obviously get to them this way and start to work on them. What is the big difference between what I'm seeing here in this other area? Well, there's more that you can do. You can think of it that way. There's more features, more capabilities. One of them is you're still storing your projects in this centralized location, but these schedules are managed with Project Professional. Okay, they're managed with the desktop application. That is different than what we're seeing when we're in the P1 projects, right? The P1 projects are all being managed within the browser. There are a lot of capabilities there, as we're seeing, right? The ability to use boards, the ability to use the timeline, of course, the assignments and notifications and all of that. And that may be enough. That may be enough for many project managers, many organizations. Just being able to have that capability is sufficient, right? But once you move into a little bit more robust capabilities, like being able to manage the projects with Project Pro, you are looking for doing things like timesheets. You want more resource capabilities, like the ability to request a resource before they get built onto a project team. You want some more resource reporting capabilities. That's when PWA really comes into play, and you need either P3 or P5 for those particular capabilities. So if we look at like this Buildout Central, here you're seeing the same schedule that I'm working on in Project Pro, but I'm able to see it here just simply within the browser. And I can make some updates to a project like this. Notice that there are a lot of commands that I have available to me just simply here in the browser. So can I do a lot of those things that we just saw in P1? Definitely, right? We don't have areas like the grid and the boards, however. Instead, we're working more like if we were in Project Pro, just simply within the browser. So definitely some differences, certainly more capabilities as it relates to what we can do here within Project. You're also noticing that when I go into some of these other areas, that you're seeing things like all of this project information that I can track. Now, you still can do this, and you can do this within the project app here within P1. It's just in a different area in which you manage those types of settings. Okay, so the way that you handle essentially the metadata management, if you will, of the project information is just simply organized and tracked in a different way. Okay. Some of the other capabilities that we get here out of P3 is the ability to work with our project sites. So I can navigate down into my project site. This is where the collaboration is really expected to happen. here within the project site. So notice I have, as I click on that link, I have things like document libraries. I get some different lists that I can work with, like issues and risks, and all of this can be rolled up into these different reporting areas of the tool. I don't get that in P1. So in P1, the whole site and collaborative area is something that you would typically build out, and something you may not need. You might be handling a lot of that in somewhere else within SharePoint, for example, and you don't need it here within, within Project Online or PWA, I should say, and Project. So again, people are just simply going to take different approaches as they start to work with it. So looking back, let's take a closer look at what we're going to see with P5, right? So now we move into project P5, which, and you'll see on Microsoft's website, it'll say, okay, there's more things that you get out of P5 that you don't get in P3, particularly around the resource management and portfolio management. There's not a lot of really significant differences, I would say, between the different levels between P3 and P5, surprisingly enough. Most of them are very subtle, and there are areas like some of the print areas that we get around the resource management piece, and also some of the portfolio management areas, some subtleties there that we're not seeing. The other part of it here with P5 too is that the expectation is that you'd really be moving into multiple licenses across your organization, right? And so for a smaller implementation, P3 would probably be fine as you move into managing projects within PWA. But as soon as you are looking to add new members that are going to be using Project Pro, new users that need to see the projects, they will also need licenses. So end users will need the Project Essentials license. So once you start thinking about how you're going to be adding users, there's a good chance you're going to move into P5. When you do move into P5, you will only need a single subscription to P5. And ideally, you would associate that subscription and that license to an administrative account, not an end user account, not somebody that works within the company, somebody in IT, for example. We want to avoid that because if there's turnaround or there's shifting of positions and things like that, you don't want to have to worry about that particular license. So I strongly recommend that you create some type of if you don't already have one, type of service or 365 administrative account, and that's the one that you associate to your P5 license. That will then allow you to provision the PWA instances and then associate the user accounts to the appropriate group that needs it. Okay, so that's a way that you can handle that. So where are those differences? Well, let's take a look. They're not too dramatic, but they're going to be found here. So if I go back to projects, just kind of navigating my way back up to the top here, I'll hit projects. And then I'll go into the resources area, which is over here on the left-hand side. So now I want to drop in to this location. And here are all the resources that I can work with. I'll just pick on one of these resources here. So some of the subtleties will be things like printing. So P5 has the ability to dump out, P3 doesn't. So there's just kind of smaller things like that that you'll see that you get with P5 that you don't get with P3. And again, one of the things, and we'll talk more about this later in some upcoming webinars, is how Microsoft is really positioning Project Online and PWA to eventually go away, and all of their project and portfolio management services and capabilities are going to be within Power Platform, right? And the idea is that you build your solutions out of there. They're giving you all of the capabilities, they're giving you all the nuts and all the bolts, and they expect you to go build it. Okay. Now it can mirror a lot of what you're doing in PWA, and that's ideally how you would handle that. But they're giving you all the parts, some of the instructions, but not everything. Okay, you will have to go out and essentially build it yourself, which is a good thing at the end of the day because it allows you to really build it how you want it, right? And add that functionality in as kind of as it comes along. Okay. But Project Online, as it is with PWA, is going to be supported for a number of years to come. So if you're using it today and you plan to, continue to, have it work for you, that's perfectly fine too. And eventually, you'll start to move into this new project service kind of framework that's out there. Okay. So again, what are we seeing with P3 and P5? Well, immediately we have the ability to just get a little bit more information about how we're managing these resources. Areas like capacity planning, assignment information for our resources, and things like resource requests, right? Very powerful part of this tool where I can say, hey, this is somebody I need for my project. I want to see who's managing them, and let me go ahead and just push that out there. And then whoever is managing that resource can approve that request for a resource, and then they go into their project. So if I click on a resource like this, I go into capacity planning. This will show me what availability is I have for this resource, what they're potentially working on, right? So these different very powerful kind of visualizations that I can work with right away out of the box, right? Nothing here has been customized. These are just things that you get immediately working with project. Okay, and I'll go back to the project center. Now the portfolio area is still very much, alive and well. I'm not displaying it here in this section, but if I click on the cog and I go into my PWA settings and I go into my quick launch, we'll see that the capabilities are here. So under strategy, we have driver library, driver prioritization, portfolio analysis. These are all still here, right? It's just a matter of hiding them. So things that you will not use as part of, PWA, these will be things that you just simply don't display, don't show to the users, right? No need to see all that information in there. Okay. Hey guys, thanks for checking out our videos. Please subscribe to get updates on Project Online, the new project for web, and other interesting and fun topics. So look forward to seeing you, and we'll be pushing some more videos up. So subscribe and check out the next video.